out our pose with this worksheet as our guide. Once we have the pose planned out, then we are going to begin by rolling a slab for our body. And we're going to start with the construction of the core and then build outward from there. So the process that we're going to use for our body is a slab. So we'll be needing thickness strips, a rolling pin, and some clay, which your clay should be stored in an airtight bag so that it's not being exposed to the air. So once we have this, we're going to make sure that it's wedged into a cube and then begin to roll it out. And for this, we might need to stand up. Again, I'll be pressing the shape of the body into the clay with a dull pencil, and so I'm going to place this on top near the top edge of my slab so that I have enough room for the legs to come down. So pressing this on here, pressing into the clay with my pencil. And I can go ahead and mark out like where those legs are going to join together. Alright, if I can't see the impression very well right now, then I can again always go over it with the pencil to clearly define where the edges of my slab should be. From there, then I can use the thickness strip to plan out the length of the legs. If we look at a human figure example, the legs are pretty long in proportion to the body. There is a guide to the human figure also on your worksheet, so you can see the length of the body in terms of the height of the head. So we're just going to quickly visually mark out the length of the legs, and again using that thickness strip as a straight edge. Okay, these would be way too long for our body, so we're going to shorten them up just a little bit, so it will come to about here. And again, always better to have too much than to have too little. So now we're going to mark out the middle point where our legs come together, up at the top and down at the bottom. Okay, if we stand shoulder width apart, we can see that there is a little space between our legs, so we're going to go a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right and connect those lines together so that our legs appear fuller at the thighs versus at the ankle. Okay, now we can see the whole form of the human figure. Okay, what I like to do is remove the clay around the body and then have my body remain. So I don't need this line in here anymore. I want it to be one solid slab. That was just a guideline, and I can check to see now if my legs are in fact proportionate. Now we're going to begin constructing the arms, and for this phase we've already rolled out a slab. We know it's even thickness, so it'll be the same as our body. And now we're going to just go ahead and use the width of the thickness strip as the width of our arms. So we're going to cut this. And right now, obviously, these would be way too long to have as somebody's arms. So we're going to go ahead and cut these off straight at the top. Okay, and this is where we have to refer back to what our pose is going to be. So if we were to place these next to our figure right now, we can see that, whoa, these are way too long. Where they should come into play on your figure is about at mid-thigh level. So if we rotate this around for you, it's coming in about here. We can again look to our models and see the length of our arms versus our legs. So we need to trim these down quite a bit. We'll have to think about what our pose is going to be before we start to attach these with the score, slip, smooth method, and think about how we want to position and attach them. So we'll set those aside for a second. With our extra slab of clay, we could go ahead and also try to get out some feet from this slab so that we're not having to roll and roll and roll another slab. So I'm just going to mark out the thickness of our leg so that our feet match up. before we go ahead and attach these all together, the next thing that we're going to make is our head, but we cannot have this head be a solid piece of clay because one, it will add weight to the body that it won't be able to support, and also it would take a long time for it to dry. So we need to make this into 2 pinch pots so that it is hollow or empty in the middle. So I've got about the size that I want my head. I'm going to go ahead and break this into 2 separate pinch pots, and I need to begin by rolling the clay into a ball. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my thumb to press into the clay to form an opening. And so now I've got it opened up. I want to keep my hand situated around the edge of the clay, applying even pressure all the way around. If I'm not sure how far I want to expand the walls of my clay, there is a reference on that worksheet. The circumference or the outside edge of the circle should not expand further than that. If you find that your clay is still really thick in the middle, you can use a loop tool to subtract away some of that clay. If your outside shape is the right size but it's just a little bit too heavy in there, go ahead and take away the clay and you can smooth it out. Another issue that you might come across is if you've been using your clay repeatedly and wedging it back up, you might start to see some dry points where it cracks or separates, and that's easily fixed by adding some water back into. Okay, so that makes 1/2 of our head, and now we're going to go ahead and start to make the other half. If I go to put these together, and this is way too tall now for my head, what I can do is I can again subtract some of the clay. If I hold my needle tool steady and then just rotate the pinch pot around, I can subtract a layer of clay to take away some of the height of the head. See if this is a little bit better now. Looks a little bit more proportionate to the body, but again, if we need to subtract, we could do more of that. And if again it is too thick in the inside, we can use the loop tool to subtract away some of the thickness. So let's begin with just our head. We need to remember the 3 S's of clay. The first one is to score, so create those lines or textures around the edge of the clay to grip. And then here we want to slip, so we've got our cup of water. We're adding water to this to act as like a glue. And then right now we see this big seam around the outside edge, and we don't want that to be visible, so we're going to smooth. We can use our thumb if the clay is soft enough, or we could use the rounded edge of a wooden tool and go ahead and smooth that clay together. Keeping in mind that it is hollow, so we want to be aware of our pressure that we're putting on the clay as we smooth it together. Most of our attaching of our figure will be done while the figure is laying down. So if we want to attach our feet together, again we can score, slip, and then to smooth this type of hinge, we want to add a coil into here. So that coil is that snake-like object of clay, so we can roll that into our hands, place it right there where the 2 walls are joining together, and then use our wooden tool to smooth it in. And we'll continue to use that for the other limbs. Outside of art, one of my favorite activities to do is baking, and so I've already made a slab oven mitt and placed it around my arm. I've also made a tray of cookies out of a slab. You can see that it's even thickness, and then I've cut out small circles of slabs and attached them for the dozen cookies. And then I also used a slab to cut out a spatula to remove the cookies from the baking tray. So I need to now, since I have a clear idea of what my pose is going to be, plan out how I'm going to attach my arms. Since I'm going to be adding a lot of weight to this arm, I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the side. And so again, I have to use that score, slip, smooth method. So I'm scoring the edge, placing water on the side, and then I'm going to smooth this out. If I need a little bit more extra strength in there, I can again roll a small coil. And I will have to ultimately at the end check the back side of this. Alright, we've got our arms attached with our details such as our baking tray and our spatula, and we've packed wet paper towels underneath there to support the weight of it. Now what we want to begin doing is attaching our head. We want our head to be somewhat separated from our shoulders, like on the figure here, so that it's not looking like we don't have a neck. So what we're going to do for our neck is we're actually going to roll a coil, which is again that snake-like piece of clay, and we're going to double it up so it becomes a little bit thicker and it can support the weight of the head. So to attach this to the body is going to be our next step. So we're going to score the back side of these coils. And it's going to be thicker than what the slab is for the body, but we can use that excess clay to smooth it in. And we also need to lift the body up a little bit off the board. So I'm going to bring a wet paper towel behind here to start off. And then I'm going to begin smoothing this in. And I want to make sure that it's centered on my shoulders here. Bring these paper towels down a little bit. The reason I brought the shoulders up is so that the head isn't laying at an angle. So now we can go ahead and score this coil on the top, add water to our head, and then we're going to use that excess clay to smooth up into the pinch pots for the head. So we'll come around with our wooden tool. Now, before we finish the project, I do want to remind you that you will need to poke a hole in a discrete place on your head. So like here along the neck would be good. And that is so that it allows air to get on the inside to dry, and also so it has somewhere for it to escape as it heats up in the kiln. So we could go ahead and let our figure dry like this. If we want to add in more details, such as creating a floor or a base, we could roll a slab and attach that to here. If we wanted to make an oven to further communicate the details of the baking theme, then we could also construct that from slabs as well. It's really how far you want to take your project. So we could allow this to dry, fire, and know that the feet are big enough for it to balance. And also before we put this into the kiln or set out to bone dry, we also want to go through and smooth this out. So we can use our water cup and fingers, or we can get a paintbrush and a water cup and also go around different details to smooth those out as well. If you are worried about your figure being able to balance on just its feet, you can roll out a slab and make this into a base. Before doing that though, you don't want your feet to be at like the edge or the back of the slab. So what I did is I went ahead and put some paper towels under here to lift up the body. So it looks like just might need another one over here. And then I can go ahead and score the bottom of the feet, slip where I want them to be attached onto the slab, and then I'll go around with the wooden tool to smooth.